I'm Bob D. I'm an alcoholic. Can you hear me? I don't know if that's good or bad. I'm grateful to be here. I've because of a power that I didn't believe in and I was afraid to believe in, that I've accessed after a surrender through the 12 steps, 12 traditions in Alcoholics Anonymous, the ability to remain sponsorable and a persistent and consistent effort in this primary purpose of trying to help others. I haven't had a drink or any mind or emotion-altering medication since October 31st, 1978. My personal best, actually. So I called somebody I called two people yesterday to find out if I have a coat and tie for tonight, to find out if I should wear a coat and tie this afternoon for the workshop, and they told me no. And then everybody shows up in coats and ties. And I get it. You don't want to miss an opportunity to make someone sober longer than you are feel bad about themselves. And you've succeeded. One of the things that first got my attention, once I got drinking, the first thing I ever started to identify with was I heard Chuck Chamberlain say, the first time I heard him say it, I didn't get it. But then I heard my sponsor say something similar, and then I started to piece it together. He said that there was one problem, and it contained all problems, and that was conscious separation between me and you and me and God. And I didn't get that at first, and then I heard my sponsor share that every time he got sober, he had this feeling that overwhelmed him that he didn't fit like other people seemed to. And I thought, my God, I've had that I had that before I ever drank. This feeling, if Wilson calls it anxious apartness in the 12 steps and 12 traditions, that feeling like it's all of them and then there's me. And I'm the pretend guy sitting in the crowd of people that belong. I'm the guy who has the facade. I'm the guy who pretends he's okay, who pretends he's not afraid, who's just not. I don't even know why I'm there, because I don't belong like you people apparently belong. And I had those feelings a lot in AA meetings. And then in 1978, after relapsing for a half dozen years, I tried to kill myself because I was done. I just couldn't do this anymore. I'm in a trap I can't spring, where drinking has somehow turned on me, and it's not giving me the freedom and the ease and comfort and the relief I used to get. It doesn't allow me to come out and play anymore. I drink in depression and horrible, horrible, pathetic feelings of loneliness. And I've been trying to jumpstart that party, and I'm failing every single time. And at the same time, I get physically sober over and over and over and over again, and sobriety is not good for me, because I get sober and I sit in those meetings, and I'm not like you. I listen to you. I watch you. You guys stop drinking. You're wonderful. I hate you for it, but you're wonderful. You know, if you love everybody, you know, I'm not that guy. Something else is wrong with me. And I tried to kill myself in 1978 because I had this hopelessness. I had been fighting the bottle for 6 years seriously. And the harder I fought it, the more drunk I'd get. I heard a speaker in early sobriety say, he said, I quit drinking seriously 50 times. He said, every time I quit drinking, I got drunker in hell. He said, that quitting drinking was killing me. And I sat there and went, oh yeah. And I don't know that this is alcoholism. This is a disease that, as Chamberlain will know, a loneliness such as few do. This inability to connect. So I found a paragraph. I thought, like a lot of us think, my first 5 years or so of sobriety, I thought the answer to soothe these feelings of separation, this secret loneliness I don't want anybody to know I feel at times because everybody else looks like they don't have it. And this depressive lean I have in my personality, And so I thought, what I need is, I need somebody, I need to find the right person to have a relationship with, right? I was convinced of that. If I had the right person to love me the right way, not like the others, but the right way, surely then this thing inside of me would be soothed and healed and filled up this vacancy. And I failed at a bunch of those. And I can't, not only just with personal relationships, I failed on the job. I don't know what it is about me. I interview well and I get a good job. 3 weeks later, I start building cases against the people there. And I can't help it that I can see the stupidity in people quickly. It's a gift. And I went through 9 jobs in 4 years. Now, 9 jobs in 4 years speaks volumes of separation, volumes of untreated alcoholism, volumes of a guy who doesn't fit anywhere. And it doesn't matter how much I try to blame them. You know, after a while, after about 6 or 7 of those failed jobs, I start thinking to myself, listen, either there's something wrong with me, or I am the most amazing idiot magnet on the planet. You know what? I mean, what's, you know, and you run after a time, you run out of the ability to blame them. And what starts to cook out is it's me. But I don't know what to do about it. I found this paragraph that smashed a lot of my hope that I could overcome this on my own, that I could just eventually outgrow it. And it's in step 4 in the 12 steps and 12 traditions. First time I ever read this, it made me sick to my stomach because it was true. And here's what it says. It is from our twisted relations with family, friends, and society at large that many of us have the ability to form a true partnership with another human being. My egomania digs 2 disastrous pitfalls. Either I insist upon dominating the people I know, or I depend upon them far too much. If I lean too heavily on people, they will sooner or later fail me, for they are human and cannot possibly meet my incessant demands. In this way, my insecurity grows and festers. When, on the other hand, I habitually try to manipulate others to my own willful desires, they revolt and resist me heavily. Then I developed hurt feelings, a sense of persecution, and a desire to retaliate. As I redouble my efforts at control and continue to fail, my suffering becomes acute and constant. You see, I have not once sought to be just one in a family, to just be a friend among friends, to be a worker among workers, to be a useful member of society. Always I tried to struggle to the top of the heap, or failing that, to hide underneath it. This self-centered behavior blocked the partnership relation with any of those about us. Of true brotherhood, I had small comprehension. That's horrible, isn't it? Because it's true. As I read it, I could feel the hopeless feeling of distress and loneliness that as if I can't will myself out of it. And when Chuck said there was one problem contains all problems, selfish, conscious and unconscious separation, in the book it talks about something that's very interesting that hooks into that. It says selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our troubles. My separation is because I got too much of me between me and you. And I got too much of me between me and God. And I understand that sense of anxious apartness he talks about. And so, you know what, here's what I did. I get sober. I have an abnormal reaction to abstinence, which drove me eventually to sponsorship and the steps. Because if I could have just quit drinking and been happy, joyous, and free, I'd have done that. But my alcoholism, for all intents and purposes, starts where the bottle and the bag ends. I'm an everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous because of the membership requirement that was originally written by Bill Wilson in the Gins where the bottle ends. I would return to drinking time and time and time again because it's medicine. Because I don't know what else to do when I start suffering from anxiety, loneliness, depression, that feeling of not fitting. And so Wilson says that selfishness and self-centeredness is the root of our trouble. And so I start going through the steps, and the steps reduce selfishness and self-centeredness some. I started getting a different perspective on life when I finally did a fourth and fifth step, and the fourth step out of the big book, when I listed all my judgments, my resentments, and then the book says we were prepared to look at it from an entirely different angle, and I started looking at it through their eyes. What did my relationship with my mother and father look like to them? How did they feel? See, selfish, self-centered people, we never look at that. I'm too self-centered to have any other centeredness. And so I started looking at that from their point of view. This was our course to realize that these people on my list were perhaps spiritually sick. And even though I didn't like their symptoms, which was the second column, and the way those symptoms disturbed me in the third column, they're asking me to realize something I don't want to realize. That I am perhaps like them, spiritually sick. So you guys are asking me to get humble enough and honest enough to start putting myself in their shoes and see how, if I was afraid like they were afraid, if I'd been hurt like they were hurt, if I was vacant and driven like they were, and I've been all those things in my life, truly, that I could have done to somebody else what they had done to me. And it was a game changer for me. I remember coming out the backside of that thinking, oh my God, how wrong I'd been about my mother and father, how wrong I'd been about all the girls in my life, how wrong I'd been about the bosses, and how wrong I'd been about the world that I viewed as unfair, unforgiving, and just kind of vengeful. And you know what I saw coming out the backside? I was the only guy that was like that. What I couldn't understand is why my parents put up with me stealing from them and lying to them year after year. How could they? Because I wouldn't have. I couldn't have put up with what they put up with. I don't think I have that capacity to love to that degree. The bosses, I understood why I could only them. And the girls that had dumped me, I understood why they don't. When I put myself in their place and saw what they saw and felt what they felt, oh my God, I understood exactly why they dumped me. What I didn't understand is, why did she take me back? That blew my mind. And what happens is the whole world changes. And I'm the guy that's the most unforgiving. I'm the guy that's the most vengeful, the most reason. It's me. I tried to make it out to look like you. And this exercise was massive ego reduction for me, because that's what my ego does. It judges. It creates opinionation, entitlement. And so I was getting dialed down a little bit, and it really was good for me. But then something happened to me that happens to a lot of people, and I sponsor a ton of guys, and what this happens a lot to people that are sober over 20 or 30 years. They've been through the steps 5, 6 times. They've made every amends to make. They sponsor people, and they're still struggling with this lonely feeling and this inability to have as the book says, a true partnership with another human being. And I remember I was probably 20 years sober, and I'd been through the steps a bunch. And I was going to go, I don't know what else to do, so I was going to go through them again. And there was a guy in AA that used to talk about practicing the original 12 traditions as a spiritual way of life. And he used to say things like, I think they're the higher set of spiritual principles. Well, when I don't think I could have heard that any other time in my sobriety. Because when I first got sober, those were like some kind of rules, and I don't like rules. And I don't, I felt like that character in that Humphrey Bogart movie, The Treasure of Sierra Nevada, that goes, badges? I don't need no stinking badges. Only I was that way with the traditions, right? I'm rule resistant. Now listen to this. I like rules for you, but my case is different, right? I'm a special case, and I started thinking about this, and I started looking a little bit at the history of the traditions and how they got adopted. And Bill Wilson didn't write the short form of the tradition, trying to get groups to adopt them. He couldn't even get groups to read them. There's actually letters in our archives asking the founder of AA to come and speak at the group anniversary as long as you promise not to talk about those traditions. And I get it. We used to read them at my home group, and the long form is long. I mean, we'd read them, and you could just watch the eyes of the newcomers glaze over, and just, when's it make it stop? I want to get back to the important stuff that has to do with me. I get that. See, I get that. But after almost 2 years of frustration, Wilson agreed to back the short form, and they became our main traditions. And it's odd how most of the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous isn't really aware or have never really looked at in any depth the long form. And yet that is where the spiritual growth sort of came from for me. And I was a little over 20 years sober, and I started thinking about these as a way to practice, a way to conduct my life. And I started practicing them in my business. And I had it was a fairly successful company, but there was friction there. And a lot of the friction came from me. And I started introducing the 12 traditions, not as something from AA, but just as principles that we would try to conduct our company by. And it was so mind-blowing to me, because non-alcoholics, you present them with these principles and they go, oh yeah, that's great. Oh, group conscience, common welfare. Oh yeah, that's good. You present that to alcoholics and they go, well, I don't know. What about me? But I ran the business, and we had a lot of unity, because in the first tradition, it defines the problem that I suffer from, and a lot of us suffer from in sobriety. We cover it up. We normalize it as Silkworth says to us, our alcoholic life seems the only normal one. But it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And so I started looking at these as if these are principles I could try to live my life by. And in the first tradition, defines the problem. And just like the steps, the real problem is defined in step 1, powerlessness and unmanageability. And then it goes through all 12 steps, and by the time you get the result of these steps, it's an amazing thing that Alcoholics Anonymous can promise with reasonable certainty that you take these steps, something's going to happen to you. We don't know what's going to happen, but something inside of you is going to wake up. And I've been to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings in countries and in places where there's no Christianity. I did a 3-day workshop in India. Everybody in the room except for me and Debbie D were Hindus. And yet there were people in that room that were sober over 30 years, and they became, AA made them better Hindus, made them better husbands, better sons, better citizens. It did something to their spirit. Something inside of them that's good woke up. I've had the same experience in several countries in the Middle East where everybody there was Muslim. That's all we can really promise you. We don't know what you're going to believe. You may go back to your religion of your childhood. Who knows? We don't really care. We just want you to take these actions, and we can promise you with reasonable certainty something's going to happen to you. And you can interview 1,000 members of Alcoholics Anonymous who have worked these steps, and they'll tell you how they sit in their own lives differently than they did before they got here. Something changes. And I had a friend who was a pilot, and he said one time that he thought AA could also stand for altered attitudes, which I didn't like when I first heard that, because everybody's been telling me I have a bad attitude all my life. And then he explained it. He said, in pilots, an attitude is the angle of approach when you're trying to land a plane. And I thought about that, and I thought, man, I've had a selfish, self-obsessed, self-concerned angle of approach to life. What I suffer from every time I quit drinking is an obsessive self-concern. I just get me right on top of me. And I start feeling like I'm smothering myself with my fears, with my dissatisfaction, with my resentments. I'm smothering Bob with Bob till I can't take it anymore. And I'm not drinking because I want to ruin my life. I'm drinking because I'm hoping that the medicine will work, even though it hasn't worked in the last couple years. And I play that game of let's bet my life on something. No, I keep hoping. And so I start looking at this. What's the problem here? If powerlessness and unmanageability is the original problem in the steps, what's the problem here? And it's interesting, the wording. It says, for our common welfare should come first. Personal recovery depends upon AA unity. There's two principles there that are important to me. The first is the pecking order. The common welfare. So in other words, I got to put what's good for you ahead of what I think is good for me. Well, alcoholics, I'll do that if I'm getting my way, right? But if it comes to somebody here is not going to get their way, it's going to be you. Because I'm a me first person, obsessively self-concerned. And you're asking me to put God first, everybody else second, and me always last. I'm telling you, first time I ever realized that, my ego, I could feel it twitching inside me. Oh no, the great cry of the alcoholic. Well, that's all good, but what about me? What about me? So, and then the second thing is that personal recovery depends upon AA unity. I drank alcohol for a sense of unity. Carl Jung talks about that in a letter to Bill Wilson, that he said he suspected from working with Roland Hazard and countless other alcoholics, that the alcoholics, my thirst for alcohol isn't a thirst for alcohol. It's a thirst for connectedness, unity, or if you're more religiously minded, you consider it a union with God. My need to become one with, because I'm painfully one apart from. And I drank whiskey for that, and it worked for a while. I'll tell you, whiskey was the most immediate and effective treatment for the spiritual malady of alcoholism I'd ever found. And I would drink it to this day if it hadn't stopped working. I could walk into a bar in the good days when it still worked, depressed, loneliness, my life is crap. I don't like me. I don't like anybody. I don't even like the people in the bar. Do you ever walk into a bar sober and just instantly know that they're stupid, cliquey people? Just nah. And then 6 drinks with a couple of them. 8 drinks in, we're planning our vacations together. I remember, I'd die for you, man. Against the backdrop of how my spiritual condition, when I walked in there, that's amazing. If a therapist could promise that kind of effect after one therapy session, oh, you'd be dealing out the money. So when alcohol worked, was the most immediate and the most effective treatment for alcoholism I've ever found. But when it turns on you, it turns on you. And I've never known a case of somebody who could turn it back. I've known dozens of people, and a lot of them are dead, that have tried to recapture that effect and failed, and it cost them their lives. So I got to reproduce the effect that was produced by alcohol when it set its hook in me, and I became obsessed with the effect. Because I wasn't obsessed with Budweiser or rum or vodka. I was obsessed with the effect. And if AA doesn't duplicate that effect, why would I stay here? Just to feel like I'm doing time? Because that's what abstinence had for me. I'd just get sober, and I'd be miserable and lonely and depressed, and I don't fit anywhere. And I'd get like a mule in a hailstorm, and I'd hunker down and take it as long as I could, because I understand intellectually I must not drink. But my God, I can't. My emotions can't take this. And I'd drink again, hoping for the medicine. I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, and before I ever believed in God or anything here, I had witnessed it work. I'd met some people that I was in halfway houses with, and they would throw themselves into AA, and a year later, they're different. And they're happy and sober at the same time. I can't get those two things in the same zip code. And I thought, as it says in the book, we saw that it really worked in others. And I believed in the hopelessness and futility of my life as I'd been living it, and I believed that. If you have been the guy like I was, that for a half dozen years, you're in trouble up to here, and it's turned on you, and you're swearing to yourself and meaning it, sometimes sobbing, I'll never touch that stuff again, and you always go back to it, miserable. The last couple of years I drank in depression. Sometimes if nobody was around, it didn't even do what it needed to do, and that's to wash away the shame and the guilt and the remorse, and I had a wealth of that. At the end of my drinking, sometimes I'd drink and I'd cry because I don't know what's wrong with me, and alcohol has turned on me. The only thing I could ever rely on, and it's turned on me. And I'm dying of alcoholism. And when I went to a bridge in 1978 to take my own life, it didn't feel like it was alcoholism. It felt like I was dying of loneliness and depression because I don't fit when I drink now. And I don't know why. I used to. And I don't fit when I'm sober, and I'm lost. And I'm in a trap I cannot spring. When abstinence is horrible and drinking has become horrible, you're in a bad spot. And I was in a bad spot, and that's when I tried to kill myself. And I didn't think it was alcoholism. And I kind of had proof, delusional proof, because I'd go to meetings and I'd have all the depressive, lonely anxiousness going on inside of me, and I'd sit in those meetings and I'd look at you. You guys quit drinking and you're wonderful. I quit drinking and I feel like I'm doing time. And I don't know what's wrong with me, but it's evidently not the same thing that's wrong with you, because look at you. And so I came to a conclusion that AA is not for me, and I never did it. Isn't it? It's at least I didn't have to, by coming to that conclusion, you don't have to write an inventory or pay the money back. It's just easy. And I was dying of alcoholism. And one of the things that turned me off about AA, it was God. And I was a want-to-be atheist. When I say that, I'm not a real atheist. I've known some real atheists. You have to be very religious about your atheism to be a good atheist. You know what I mean? I can't get that much traction behind it. What I really and truly am is I'm a guy who's afraid. I'm a guy who in the core of my being is a feeling of unworthiness, that if there was a God, good for you, but you don't understand, I'm too stained for that. So if there just can't be a God. And I'm the kind of guy that if I think you don't like me, I'm going to not like you first. And I did that with God not because I'm a real atheist. I'm not. I'm afraid. And so I come into Alcoholics Anonymous and my sponsor starts spoon feeding. He spoon fed me the traditions before the steps. And one of the things he talked to me about, he said, you got to go to meetings and listen. Because if you listen and you're not in there having conversations in your head with people that aren't in the meeting, but if you actually listen and you're present in the meeting, God will talk to you. And because I asked him to sponsor me and I told him I'll do anything he asked me to do, he got me to pray. I don't think any other situation or place on the planet could have got a guy like, and I told him, and he didn't care. I said, well, I can't pray. I don't believe in God. He said, I don't care. I said, well, I'll be a hypocrite. He said, you've been a hypocrite all your life. Just do it. And that's one of the things to this day, I love about Alcoholics Anonymous. We don't care about how you feel and what you think. I know you do. I know. You care about that a lot. But it's in caring about that guys like me destroy themselves. And he only cared about what I did, and he wanted me to do it. And I started praying, and I basically, because I didn't know what else to do, and I told him I'd do anything he asked me to do. And it's a weird deal. From the moment, and this is true no matter what your religious background is, it happens in every alcoholic. The minute you turn your consciousness towards something, that something starts to show up. And it's through the promise in the second tradition. The second tradition says, for a group purpose, but I think also for my personal purpose, there is but one ultimate authority, a loving God, as he may express himself in our group conscience. What does that mean? That means if you ask this power you don't even believe in to show up in your life, and you go to meetings, and it's usually the first place, God starts talking to you. And he talked to me a lot. And that's why when I'm in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous, I'm very respectful. I don't want to be on my phone. I don't want to do anything that would distract the guy sitting next to me from hearing what he's got to hear. So I'm very respectful. Alcoholics Anonymous meeting is something I take seriously. Now, I try not to take myself seriously. Problem, a little bit drinking maybe, or a little drugs, and they get sober and they're fine. Well, then this isn't life or death for you. It is for me. That's why I get a little uncomfortable when people want to change stuff in AA. I get a little uncomfortable because there's nothing in the history of the planet that's ever worked as effectively with guys like me as AA. And I get it. The alcoholic comes along, first thing in 10,000 years that ever worked for alcoholism, and we're going to improve it. I get it. But let's not do that. We can't duplicate this again, maybe, The window of opportunity that Wilson, all those things fell into place. Oh, my God. So God will talk to me in a meeting if I can be clear. And to be clear, that means I got to be free of resentments and fears. I can't be sitting in the meeting worrying about me full of fear, or sitting in the meeting full of resentment, having conversations with people that aren't in the room. And I've done that. You ever walked into a meeting, something on your mind, just sit down. They start reading chapter 5. Next thing you know, instantly it seems like we're saying the Lord's Prayer. What happened to the meeting? Right? Because I've returned to the bondage of self. So I really try to respect AA meetings and try to pay attention. And you don't know what you're going to hear. I was just at a meeting the other day, a meeting that that I've judged somewhat. I know most of you find it, oh, Bob, you're judgy? I got a noticer. I just notice things, and I'm in this meeting that I don't really expect to hear anything spiritual. And a guy said something blew my mind. He talked about a prayer that he used, and I thought, I left that meeting thinking, I'm going to do that. That's good. And the only reason I heard that is I was reasonably clear of resentments and fears and anxieties on that day. So I could hear God. God speaks through people. And the add-on, the second tradition is it's so odd because it's the one place where it's longer in the short form than it is in the long form, which has an alcoholic spin on it somehow. I don't know what that's about. But the add-on is brilliant. It defines us in a unique manner. It says our leaders are but trusted servants. They do not govern. Alcoholics Anonymous is the only organization on the planet where you work somewhere, you sweep the floors, maybe someday you'll be the manager. Now, we're the opposite. We all come in here with an ego disorder. I almost died of alcoholism because I fit the adage, you can always tell an alcoholic, you just can't tell him much, right? I'm the I know guy. I can sit and I can't hear you because I can't shut this off from judging you and picking you apart. There was a great psychiatrist in Pennsylvania. He was on the staff of 3 different treatment centers I was in. Third time that I was at a place where he was lecturing, he singled me out and he said something to me that was the most accurate. I've been in a lot of therapy. This was the most accurate diagnosis. The rest of them was all nonsense. But he said to me, he said, kid, guys like you don't get better. He said, some of you will find a way to stay abstinent for maybe a decade or more, but you don't recover and you don't get better because even though you have no self-esteem, and I don't know how he knew that, even though you have no self-esteem, you've grown this giant ego. And because of that, you have an inability to listen to anyone in order to learn anything new. Bob, you're only capable of listening to see how you were already right. And in my head, I had to discount him and make him into be stupid. But I'll tell you, truly, of all the therapists I was at, was the most accurate diagnosis of me. And what was killing me, it was creating the separation between me and life. Thought she was going to come up with the hook. Any day now, And I'm an everyday member of Alcoholics Anonymous because of the membership requirement in the third tradition that membership should include all who suffer from alcoholism. I'm an everyday guy. I mean, every day I get up, I have 2 hours before I do anything in the morning where God and I try to get right. And in that, I also have the sponsees that have called and texted and emailed. And I think about the plans for the day. And they start off by responding to that stuff. I've always returned phone calls and texts and emails. The worst thing, the most irresponsible thing I could do is somebody reaches out for help and I let them hang out there on the branch, right? So I respond. Because that's what spiritual responsibility is, the ability to respond. And I think about my 24 hours ahead and I get going. And I do all these things. And I go to a meeting every day. I mean, I probably average, I'm over 46 years sober and I still average 8 to 10 meetings a week. And I don't think I ever fall below 8 unless I'm sick or it's in the hospital or something. And why is that? Why? Well, do you need that many, Bob? No, probably not. But I'll tell you something. I'd rather do a little bit more AA than I need than a little bit less than I need. It's that little bit less that'll kill you. So I'm not a minimalist. Minimalists are driven by self-serving. You want recovery of convenience. I think there's high spiritual value in actions of inconvenience, which the selfish, self-centered, self-obsessed, self-serving, self-absorbed alcoholic of my type, we don't like that. And yet it's good for me. And I hope if you're struggling here, I hope you either have or will get service positions that are inconvenient. Because if you only do the convenience stuff in Alcoholics Anonymous, it's back to serving yourself again. So we do inconvenient things. And God, I sponsor guys. I always take their calls. And maybe if any of you sponsor a lot of people, there's always one or two that when their name comes up on the phone, you go, he's going to go on for 15 minutes about his sick relationship. And oh my God, and I just want to hang myself. And then I take the call and it's something about something different, right? So we respond. You know, in the fifth, I don't have time to touch all this, my experience with all the traditions. We do tradition workshops in my home group. We do 4 times a year. We go through the long form. And then we have a weekend, usually once a year, where we do that in depth. And it takes time. It's a lot. And so in the 5th tradition is where I stumbled and I got lost. It talks about our primary purpose. And Wilson is brilliant when he talks about the 3 things that will easily divert us, when he calls it in the long form, from our primary spiritual aim: money, property, prestige. I think if he wrote it today and observed in the fellowship what I've observed, he'd probably add sex and relationships to that will easily divert you. It's all the things that serve self, that give an erroneous promise of self-gratification and self-security. Money. How many of us become driven by that? You know, it doesn't, and it has, that's a dog you can't feed full. And the same with relationships, and the same with property and prestige. How many of us we become prestige predators in AA? We just want attention. I had a friend that used to give the funniest talk. He'd say, I was so bad at that I thought every meeting I went to, my name was, does anyone want to share? And he'd share it at every meeting. And he said even in home, when he was all by himself, he'd open the refrigerator, and when the light came on, he'd tell his story, you know. It kind of gives a new idea of what attention deficit might mean, you know. And so we don't self-grandize here. We don't grandize ourselves. We don't promote ourselves here. And that's covered in depth in the 11th tradition. So because of success and sobriety, I got off track. And I didn't even know it happened. You know, I bought this thing, hook, line, and sinker, that my purpose in life is to help other drunks. And I started doing that, and I started, I'm making amends, and I started trying to carry these principles into my job, and I became very successful materially. And that thing that happens to a lot of us, when you're in detox or you're in the county jail, you got a bad case of alcoholism and you know it. At 10 years sober, 15 years sober with a couple $100,000 in the bank, intellectually you have alcoholism, but it doesn't feel as bad as it was when I was in detox. And what happens, it says this in the 10th step, one of the warnings is that it's easy to let up on this spiritual program of action and rest our laurels. It really is. And I get seduced by the results of living a spiritual life into a false sense of okayness. And it started when I was probably 14 or 15 years sober, and I was doing well. And it accumulated in a severe, frightening depression at 19 years sober. And the crazy part about that year, I made the most money I'll probably ever make in my life. Deep 7 figures. I had everything. It's horrible when you have everything you want, and now that you got it, you don't really want it. The shine is worn off of everything. And I don't understand why I feel so bad. But I heard Chamberlain say this out of things you can put between you and you. And there you are. And the shines wore off of everything. And you're still you. And the things that you believed would make a difference have not only not made a difference, they kind of disappointed you and made you feel worse. And here I am at 19 years sober, and I'm in bad shape, and I'm still doing the AA because I got this kind of ego that wants to do the minimal. My ego left unchecked will do the minimal amount of recovery because it still wants the bragging rights of a good member without being all in. You know what I'm saying? I still want that attention, that look, but I'm not all in. And I've diminished my service. I've diminished my involvement. Still going. And I was so depressed, I could almost not get off the couch. And I finally went to this meeting, and I ran into an old friend of mine. I opened up to him, and I told him how I felt and what was going on. And I'll tell you, God spoke through him. And he said to me, well, you run your mouth a lot in AA, and you still go to some meetings. He said, but I don't think your primary purpose is helping God's kids anymore. I think your primary purpose is you. And that nailed me. And I got very uncomfortable because he was right. And it snapped me out of that deal. And within a day or so, I got my car. I got a couple new guys in my car. I've gone back to about 4 or 5 treatment center meetings a week, plus the regular meetings in my home group. And I'm back on fire through my actions. And here's one of the things I learned. Now, I didn't feel all in at first, but here's something that's amazing. If you act like a surrendered servant, even if you don't feel like it, you get what they get, because it's all in the actions. And so I started acting like the member of AA I should have been, and I haven't wandered from that since. Not that I don't get full of me, sometimes I do, but I've never changed my focus and my purpose. And I think the purpose of helping other drunks is one of the greatest gifts we're given here, because it gives my life meaning. Mark Twain had a quote. It was one of my favorites. He said that the 2 most important days in any human being's life is the day you were born and then the day you realized why. You claim your purpose. And we have a sublime divine purpose in Alcoholics Anonymous, a purpose of helping other drunks. And because of that, the worst things about you, the things you were most ashamed of, all your mistakes, drunk and sober, become valuable. The worst about you becomes the best of you in this purpose that's not you anymore. And so I try to be mindful. And the only way you can tell is you can't tell by how you feel or what you think. You got to keep watching your feet. What are my actions? I just had this conversation with a guy who was going to put a pistol in his mouth when he was 18 years sober. That's how I get these guys a lot. And I said, listen, I want you to imagine that there's an alien race on another planet, and they got this high-tech equipment, and they're monitoring everything you do 24 hours a day. They're watching everything you say, everything you do. Would they come to the conclusion that your primary purpose is recovery in Alcoholics Anonymous, or would they come to the conclusion from observation that your primary purpose is you? What would they see? Because that's reality. That's what AA started introducing me to, is what's real. See, in my mind, there's all kinds of stuff. And I've had great sponsorship. People who would tell me the truth, even when I don't want to hear it. Well, you say that. How come your feet are making a liar out of you? I don't like to hear that. And the only way I can tell what's real about me is from what I do. In the seventh tradition, and when I came to my first meeting, Alcoholics Anonymous in 1971, I put like 50 cents. A lot of people were putting dollars in the basket. I put 50 cents in. And I thought I should have a parade for doing that. But in 1971, a gallon of gasoline was like 30 or 35 cents. And if it's in today's money, you're still putting $1 in the basket and you're having 5 cups of coffee. So here's the truth. You're a taker. You're using AA. You're a selfish taker. Because where can you go and get 5 cups of coffee and attention and get to share your feelings for $1? I mean, you're getting therapy and coffee. So I get the guys I sponsor. I said, listen, what the rule has always been unspoken is we put the price out there drinking. When you pay $20 for a Grey Goose and Red Bull, I mean, geez, $20. God, when you come to, you blew the mortgage. I mean, Jesus, that's a lot. But it's important that we pull our own. And it comes in a lot of forms. When I was a year sober, I lost my first job, and I was eligible for unemployment insurance that would have given me $120 tax-free every week for nothing, for 0 time working. And my sponsor made me take a job that after taxes, I ended up with less than almost between $96 and $97 a week. I thought, this is stupid. But he knew that my self-respect and he knew that my integrity, that it was important for a guy like me to pull my own weight. And so he said, you've taken money from the government, you've taken money from your parents, you're going to put your own deal in here. And so I started to do that. Tradition number 8. This is so pertinent in today's world, and it's a hard one to talk about because it calls for opinions sometimes, but I'm going to try to keep it to my experience. In the long form, it says, Alcoholics Anonymous should remain forever non-professional. We define professionalism as the occupation of counseling alcoholics for fees or hire. But we may employ alcoholics where they're going to perform those services which we might otherwise have to engage non-alcoholics. Administrative, clerical. Our central office, we have a hired administrator who runs the office, but he doesn't get paid for 12-step calls. If he takes a 12-step call, he's got to take himself off the clock. Because the book goes on to say, even though these services may be well recompensed, our AA 12-step work is never to be paid for. I had a lot of credentials from in the early 70s when I became a therapist of sorts, which is, that whole concept is ludicrous. But I had them, and I took a job my first year of sobriety as a director of inpatient treatment at a treatment center for teenagers with drug and alcohol problems. My sponsor was, he's just not smart enough to figure out a way to get paid for it. And it started to corrupt my spirit. And I started to edge away from being sponsorable and surrendered, because when you're a professional, I started becoming the I know guy again. I didn't want to do the hospital and institution meetings that he was making me do. I don't want to be on the 12-step list, because here's what I tell myself. I tell myself a bunch of BS. I do that all day long. I said it to my sponsor one time. He said, but you get paid for it. It's different. And I started cutting off the flow of grace. I was up in the Rocky Mountains when I was sober about 8 or 10 years, and I saw this pristine lake. It was so clear and so clean. You could see the rocks on the bottom. And the reason it was that way, on one side, you had a stream with water rapidly coming in, and on the other side, you had a stream with water rapidly going out, and it could not stagnate, which in my experience is for me to fill up with me. And I started to fill up with me. and I lost that job, thank God. And about a year and a half later, there was an article that came out in this magazine for people that work in the field. And it was a synopsis of occupations for people in recovery and which ones had the highest relapse rate and the highest recovery rate. The one with the highest relapse rate was counselor. I mean, statistically, according to that article, you have a better chance staying sober as a drug dealer than a counselor. And I've sponsored a lot of psychiatrists, oh my God, the two most difficult people to sponsor are clergy and therapists because they know everything. And they don't feel like they have to do what we do. They're above us. So you can't make money here. And we live in a time, I'll tell you, where there's more people trying to profit off of people's recovery than ever in the history of our planet. I take my talks, Sandy's talks, Debbie's talks, Clancy's talks, and they put them on places like YouTube where they get 30 cents for every view. Now you got a couple million views on there. And they don't ask you. My wife she's a lawyer. She sent cease and desist letters. They don't even answer you. They know you're not going to spend the money and the time and trouble to take them to court. And they're making too much money anyway. I was in 9 years in general service, and we were sitting there, a bunch of us were talking, and we were goofing about, isn't it a shame that we can't sponsor people for money, And we were kidding. It's happening. It's been happening for about 10 years. There's a guy that just died, a very famous, very wealthy man. And he would not go to AA anymore because he had a bad experience with a recovery coach. And he thinks that's AA, I guess. It's not AA. We're for fun and for free, as Chuck would say. This is not a taking place. It's a giving place. And this stuff like that, to me, it just bleeds the altruistic heart right out of Alcoholics Anonymous because we're here to help. Our primary purpose for fun and for free is to help other people. So that's an important, in this day and age more than ever. The ninth tradition, I'm not going to talk about. We should never be organized. I don't think there's much danger of that. I mean, but I want to talk about 10. 10 is one of the most violated traditions in AA. It's the one I violated a lot. It's the one I aspire for spiritual and unity reasons to do better at. And let me read it. It says, no AA group or member. So they're talking about me. Should ever in such a way as implicate AA express any opinion on outside controversial issues. Well, if you can't talk about your opinions, what are you going to talk about? My God, I mean, I'm an opinion-generating machine. I mean, I can walk into some situation I've never been into, and I'll just have opinions about it. I don't even know anything about it. It's the muscle of the ego. So, and it says especially those of politics, alcohol, reform, or sectarian religion. I know some people that left AA for a while because on Facebook there were members that they looked up to that were sober a long time that were bashing their beliefs. And it doesn't matter if it's politics. It doesn't matter. And if selfishness is the root of our trouble, how selfish do you have to be to share because they felt like I can't belong to that organization if they believe that. So we don't talk about religion. We don't talk about politics. And it makes AA a safe place that you can come here and you don't have to share our opinions about anything. Matter of fact, we're hoping you don't have any opinions, because if you can get to a place where you're opinionless, you may be carrying out the decision in step 3. Because that's the one, it's my opinions, my judgments that interfere with my surrender. The Buddhists say that all human suffering comes from an attachment to opinions and ideas. There was a great psychiatrist who said that the road to hell was paved with expectations and ideas. What if you were opinionless? Then there'd be no conflict. Because you have to have a judgment to be mad. You have to have an opinion to be at conflict or to be afraid. What if you really understood that God's got you? He's got you, he's got me, he's got us all. What if this is just the most amazing romantic comedy ever created by the creator of the universe, and I don't have to control nothing, I don't have to defend nothing, I don't have to stand up and tell you where you're wrong. I just have to sit back and enjoy the show. And every once in a while, I get called to participate. I participate from a position of a servant. How can I help? What can I do? And if I could live that way, and don't get the idea that I can live that way all the time, but I have periods of time when I'm that guy, and it's bliss because there's no conflict. It's the promises in the 9th step are coming true. Not only understanding the word serenity, but I have serenity and I know peace, because you have to have opinions to have conflicts. And I got that kind of ego. Oh my God, I don't care if it kills me. I'm going to be right. Even if it did kill me after I'm dead, as long as people walked around and said, yeah, Bob's dead, but he was right. You know. Oh. Our 11th tradition talks about self-grandizement, self-promotion. We never recommend ourselves. Our friends can recommend us. We don't promote ourselves here. And then finally in 12, and I want to read this and then we'll kind of wrap this up. I think the 12th tradition in the long form is one of the most beautiful things Bill ever wrote. He says, and finally, we place principles before personalities, that we are to actually practice a genuine humility, this to the end, that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of him who presides over us all. You know, I didn't understand that for a while. I didn't understand anonymity. I thought something that a lot of people think, well, that's just, we don't give our last names. Anonymity is such a spiritual principle. It's that I do not distinguish myself. I'm not here to become somebody. I'm here to be a servant. And I think that's the highest thing you can get here, is to be of service and to be a servant. Help God's kids. Lose your life in the service of others. Not easy. And humility, what is humility? I thought it was just being beaten up and, mea culpa. That kind of humility is rigorous honesty without ego. That I can be genuine. I can tell you everything. I can just be humble. I'm not trying to make myself bigger than I am. And I'm not trying to look exceedingly humble and try to make myself look less than I am. Early sobriety, I was at a meeting. The subject was humility. And I heard a guy say, if you think you're humble, you're not. So I get called on, and I went 5 minutes on telling them how I knew I wasn't humble, knowing that they would all think I was really humble for saying that. You know what I mean? Right. And I didn't understand principles before personalities. And I get this kind of mind. I think I know stuff that's not true. I thought for close to 20 years of sobriety that what that meant is that I was supposed to put these principles of AA, which I assumed were forgiveness and acceptance and tolerance, before your difficult personalities. And that's not it. There's only one personality I have to put these principles before and try to live by them, and it's mine. I'm the source of all my opinions, my judgments, my conflicts. I am the source of the separation. I think the ism of alcoholism is I separate myself, and it comes from the ego disorder. So I need to put these principles and live these spiritual principles, and they're principles in action to save Bob from Bob. And it's such, the blessings of my life were corrupting me. And I didn't know it. And I was taking credit for my life. And I love what it says, this to the end that our great blessings may never spoil us, that we shall forever live in thankful contemplation of him who presides over us all. Not just Bob, not just you, but over us all. We're a family here. I had a friend, Patty O, used to say, I understand I'm the child of God. I just resent the fact that I'm not the only child of God. Right. Thanks for listening.